Chapter 4. "What do you mean I can't bring these in the bank?" she shouted. "I work for the government. Of course I'm allowed to have these." She set the metal detectors off with her guns. I told her that walking into a bank with her guns exposed the way they were wouldn't be a good idea, so she borrowed one of Lily's merch jackets with the flower heart on it. This jacket concealed her guns worse than her hoodie did, but still, you could only see them if you really looked. But none of that mattered. She set the alarm off, and now she was arguing with the security guards. All of this struck me as very odd. First, I didn't even expect the bank to be open the same day it was robbed and 6 people died. Second, if there were metal detectors, why didn't she set them off when she was here earlier? And why hadn't the bank robbers' guns set them off? Third, why were there security guards now when there were none earlier? I guess it could be explained that they hired security after the incident, and I suppose that the metal detectors were turned on for the same reason. And maybe the bank was open so as to not lose profits. You know how those greedy banks are. Maybe none of it should have been a surprise. "I'm the health inspector," she shouted. "Here's my badge, right here. I can have these in the bank." "There's nothing to inspect here," the guard said. "It's against policy to be in here with those." "Against policy?" she shouted again. "What are you going to do, call the cops? What, are you going to make them take their guns off too?" I knew she was aggressive, but she seemed uncharacteristically hostile. It almost seemed like an act to me. Whether or not it was an act, that's what I took it as. So I took my supposed cue to go and try to get the security footage. I wasn't quite sure how to do that, though. My only idea was to go straight to the teller and ask to see it, but I never had the opportunity to even do that. As I waited in line, I heard a familiar voice across the room. I turned and saw what seemed to be a negotiation or something. The lady with him obviously worked for the bank. She was holding a clipboard and pen, and honestly, that's all I had to go on. But I recognized the man sitting across from her. He was saying, "Please, I need this loan. My car just broke down. I gotta get to work. I got kids. I need this loan. I can pay it back if I can get to my job. I can't get to my job if I don't have a car." It was the guy that had my phone. I knew I would run into him eventually, so I left my place in line and went to ask for my phone back. "Hey," I said, "I lent you my phone earlier today." "Excuse me?" the guy said. "I'm in the middle of something here." "Oh, no problem. I'll just take my phone back and leave you alone." Certainly he didn't think I was going to let him keep it. He couldn't be that dumb. I'm not saying that I think poor people are dumb, of course not. I know that it's only a set of systemic injustices that make them economically disadvantaged. Everyone is equal, of course, but I still needed my phone. "Get lost," he said. I did, of course. Maybe his systemic disadvantages and hundreds of years of injustice gave him the right to take my phone. I was beside myself with anger, though. So Mandy was kicked out, and I left with her. It was a bit of a walk to get to the SUV. We parked around the corner so as not to be seen. Parking a big black SUV with bullet holes in it in front of the bank seemed unwise. "Unbelievable," she said. "There weren't metal detectors this morning." "There was, actually. They weren't turned on, apparently," I replied. "Huh," she said as she hopped in the passenger seat. "Do you want to drive?" I asked. She stared at me like a gazelle that just saw a predator. Okay." So she hopped in the driver's seat. I really didn't want to drive the SUV around anymore. I had work that night, and I would be driving an ambulance around for hours. I was ready for a break. "So who were you talking to in there?" she asked as she threw it in drive. "I let that guy borrow my phone and he wouldn't give it back." "What?" she said, turning to me. "Why the hell didn't you tell me?" "Mandy!" I shouted. She slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. She hit someone. I threw my seatbelt off to go check on the guy. And what do you know? It was the guy that took my phone. She hit him right in front of the bank, where all the street cameras were, so we were definitely in huge trouble. "Trunk!" she shouted as she grabbed the guy's legs. The man was moaning and complaining as I grabbed underneath his arms and we put him in the back. I put the seats down and shoved Mandy's laundry out of the way so I could lay the man out. "Take us to the hospital," I shouted. "What? No," she said. "Now!" I felt bad for yelling at a woman like this, but a disadvantaged, inner-city, historically marginalized, systemically oppressed man took precedence over a woman. Or at least I think. I'm not entirely sure how it's all supposed to work. I don't exactly remember what my professors said about it. I tried focusing more on the medical training than the politics. Mandy listened to me, though, and started to drive. "I don't know why I agreed to drive. I can't drive." I checked the guy's vitals as best I could with no equipment. Don't say you can't drive just because you're a woman. You don't need to express your internalized misogyny. "I'm going to shoot you if you ever say misogyny again. I literally can't drive. I don't have my license." "What? Why didn't you say that?" I said as I checked the man more thoroughly for my phone. I found it right in his pocket. "I don't know," she cried. It was a rough ride, but we dropped the guy off at the hospital and just told them he was hit by a car and nothing more. Luckily, the man was rambling incoherently, and hopefully he wouldn't have realized or remembered it was us that ran him over. Needless to say, I decided to take the wheel after that. The car ride was a bit awkward. I have no idea why I was still driving this crazy girl around. Any sane person would have not only run for the hills, but would have run to the cops. But for some reason, I felt as though we were in it together, regardless of how true or untrue it may have been. It was as though I already knew I was going to get in trouble, so there would be no sense turning back now. No security footage, I ran over a guy, I don't have any hoodies. This day sucks. "I got my phone back at least," I said. "Here, let me see it," she said, reaching across the car. I obliged and handed it to her. She played with it for a minute and gave it back. "There, now you have my number." I didn't really know what to say. "Thanks, I guess." That wasn't a good response. "What, you don't want it?" she said, looking at me like I had just insulted her mother. "Fine. Give it back. I'll delete it." I knew I would need to reply with sarcasm to get a positive reaction out of her. Sadly, sarcasm does not come naturally to me. I only had a second to respond. My awkward response was, "Of course I want it. How else am I going to bother you?" She seemed pacified by that, but she didn't look happy. She was scary. But like a horror movie, she was exciting as well. Part of the thrill was that you weren't quite sure what was next. Or maybe it was that you did know what was coming, just not when. She was a living horror show. I was on a haunted train ride, and I didn't want to get off. Maybe she wasn't the crazy one between the two of us. But she needed to do laundry, so we went to the laundromat. It was just the two of us in there, waiting for her hoodies and other clothes to be washed, forced to listen to the worst songs from 15 years ago. "Your relationship with Lily seems strange," I said. Poorly said at that. Mandy sat on a bench and folded her arms. "I already told you we aren't in a relationship. I'm not a lesbian." Right, I mean, how you two interact is what I meant. You don't seem to get along with each other." "What?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "We get along fine. She's the nicest to me out of anybody I've ever met." That couldn't be true. The two of them were at each other's throats the entire time I saw them together. Because I'm a big mouth and can't control myself, I blurted out, "Even me?" That got her to blush. "I just met you today," she said, dismissive. I was blushing a bit myself, if I could guess. So I got back to the subject. "So how does she have access to city street cameras and facial recognition stuff?" The washer beeped, and she shoved her wet clothes into the dryer. "She won't tell me. I think she works for the CIA, just like her bitch girlfriend." I tried tricking her into admitting it earlier, but she didn't bite. You just walked in and asked her to pull them up, though, so you gotta know something. How did you know she could do that stuff? I asked. I screwed around a little last year. A mugshot would go up on the internet of a murderer or rapist or something. They always said, do not attempt to apprehend. Guess what I did? I went silent for a moment. You apprehended them? She turned away and smirked. No. Just then, I noticed another black SUV pull up outside. Out from the back seat came the flashy, rugged man, Eli Conti, along with two goonish-looking men. Eli Conti wore a yellow, leopard-patterned blazer and a plain pair of khakis, but I knew it was him based on his chiseled and rugged face. It made sense that he would be here. Lily told us that he owned every laundromat in the city. Go figure. Of all the laundromats, he showed up at this one. I gave Mandy a soft tap on the shoulder, and she turned and grabbed me by the wrist with murder in her eyes. Sorry, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched you, I said. It was an idiotic mistake. No, it's fine, she said, blinking and shaking her head like she was waking up from being knocked out. Just not used to a friendly touch. The mafia guy is outside, I whispered. Why are you whispering? I can't hear you. I don't hear all that good, she said, far too loud for my comfort. That mafia guy... At that moment, Eli Conti came through the front door. I went quiet and tried acting natural. Mandy looked over her shoulder and watched him walk right past us, completely without incident. He and his goons went straight to the back, through the employees-only door. We need to get out of here, I said. What? No! My clothes aren't dry yet. Besides, there's no reason to be scared of him. As far as I know, I slaughtered all of the robbers, so there was nobody left to identify me. You are talking way too loud, I said. We'll be fine, sit down. So I listened to her. She sat down next to me, very close. Her warm thighs pressed against mine. I could smell her pleasant sweatiness, she was so close. I didn't even know what to do with my hand. If I let it beside me, it would be on her leg, so I crossed my arms in an awkward and uncomfortable way. I didn't want to accidentally touch her and have her almost murder me again. I'm sorry again for touching you like that. No, I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have grabbed you so hard. I'm guessing there's a reason you reacted in such a way. I got beat up a lot when I was younger, she said. Girls, guys, kids, adults. Everyone seemed to get a few shots in. Why did they beat you up? I asked. I don't know. People just hate me. We were soon interrupted. The clop of expensive shoes on tile moved closer. You. I recognize you.